Welcome to BL-101, New Testament Greek for Beginners. The purpose for the following videos is to freely provide beginner New Testament Greek classes on the internet. Hello, my name is John Hall, and I've been teaching Bible and New Testament Greek classes for over 20 years now. Over the past few years, I've seen a need for beginning Greek classes to be freely provided on the internet. There will be no charge for these courses, with all lessons freely given. I do ask that if you wish to continue this course, that you would support the publisher of this textbook by purchasing a copy of J. Gresham Machen's text, New Testament Greek for Beginners. I think it's put out by Macmillan Press. Now, if you find these videos to be a bit rough around the edges, please forgive me. I'm a teacher and I'm not a video editor. Though I would love better tools and skills, I'm going to make do with what God has given me. If you have any questions or need tutoring, please feel free to contact me. I'd be more than glad to help when I can. Now, on to our lessons. Welcome to Lesson 2. By now, you should have mastered the material of the previous lesson. That's the Greek alphabet. Also, you should have a very good understanding of the Greek vowels as well as the diphthongs. If you have not mastered them yet, please do not go any further. Stop this lesson, go back, study some more. If you need to take a quiz, we'll set up some quizzes somehow. I'm not quite sure how, but be glad to help you out any way I can. But if you do not have a very firm grip on the alphabet, Lesson 2 will be much more of a challenge. So we're going to go over words. We're going to talk about words that you do not you've not learned yet. You've not learned any vocabulary words, but you should be able to read them relatively clearly. So, with that being said, let's begin Lesson 2. Lesson 2 is a bit of a challenge. I remember when I was a first-year Greek student taking this class, Lesson 2 was the monster in the closet. It was the one thing that was really hard to wrap my brain around as a beginning Greek student. Accents were okay. The syllables were a little bit of a challenge, but we did fine on that. It was the rules of accenting with relation to a Greek noun versus the rules of accenting versus to a Greek verb. They're two completely different rules of engagement on that. And I remember we had approached our professor and said, do we really need to know this? His response was very simple, and it reflected the same response Machen's going to give in his lecture material here. The primary purpose is to be able to become extremely familiar with the Greek language so that it becomes embedded in our minds. If we don't have rigid rules of engagement, we're not going to be able to commit it to memory as easily. And I appreciate that. With that being said, if you're a casual Greek student and you really are wanting to not get too deep into the Greek language, then what we're going to do is we're going to break Lesson 2 up into two parts. The first part, I would highly encourage every single Greek student to study the first part of this lesson out completely. We're going to talk about syllables, identifying the syllables, and identifying accents. This will be important. The second part of this lesson will go into depth. We'll talk about noun accenting and verbal accenting, and it'll be very much, if you choose to go in that direction, it will be very enriching for you because you'll be able to have this Greek language committed more to memory. Now, with that being said, Let us begin. Paragraph 9. The Greek accents indicated in ancient times not necessarily stress what we call accent today, but musical pitch. But since it is impossible for us to reproduce the original pronunciation, the best we can do is to place the stress of the voice upon the syllable where the accent occurs, and give up any distinction or pronunciation between the acute, the circumflex, and the grave, or as some people would pronounce it, the grave. I've heard it pronounced both ways. I don't have a problem with either or. Having adopted this method of pronunciation, we should adhere to it rigidly, for unless one method is adhered to, the language can never be fixed in the memory. So do you understand what J. Gresham Machen is saying here? These rules are designed to fix the Greek language in your memory. That's very, very good. So, having adopted the method of pronunciation, we should adhere to it rigidly, for unless one method is adhered to, the language can never be fixed in the memory. It is also important to learn to write the accents correctly, since the accents serve to distinguish various forms from one another, and are therefore a great help and not a hindrance in the learning of the language. Paragraph 10. Preliminary definitions. The last syllable of a word is called the ultima. The one before that is the penult, and the one before that is referred to as the antepenult. Let's take a look at some drawings that I have here. Not wrong one. Let's take a look at this here. Lesson 2. We're going to take a look at 1 John 3:22, and whatsoever ye ask, we receive of him, okay, because we keep his commandments and do those things that are pleasing in his sight. The Greek New Testament right here is, we're going to take the word lambanomen. Lambanomen. Nice long word. We'll take that word and break it down. And notice the syllables. Fill it out. Someone asked me, well, how do we know where to break the syllables up? It takes just a little bit of practice. You'll be working with the language. You'll be working with, and you'll find out that the easy places to separate the syllables are maybe between two consonants. Also, a consonant and a vowel combined together creates good syllables. It's very similar to how we speak in English, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But you'll pick it up, and you'll see the word lambanomen, and we can break it up into syllables. The first syllable is lam, ba, no, men. So we have 4 syllables there. And we break it down even further. 4 syllables is the word lambanomen. We chose this word because it has a whole lot of syllables, which is important for what we're explaining here. Now, the last syllable of a word is called the ultima. Now look at the word lambanomen. That last syllable is referred to as the ultima. The syllable that precedes the ultima of a word is called the penult. So while this is the ultima, no is the penult. The penult. The syllable that precedes the penult of a word is called the antepenult. So the 3 syllables that are very important for the Greek student to understand is the last syllable, which is the ultima, the next to the last syllable, which is the penult, and then the third is the antepenult. What are the syllables called before that? Well, they really don't have any identification marks. Sometimes the word will be referred to as a stem, but we'll talk about that later. Primarily, it's very important for us right now to know the names of the three last syllables: the ultima, the penult, and the antepenult. So we have this here. Thus, in the word lambanomen, the ultima is men, the penult is no, and the antepenult is ba. Next thing to deal with. And this is the first part of the lecture. We're not going to talk about other things except in the second half of the lecture. But this first lecture here, we're just going to deal with the very, very basics. The first part is knowing the three syllables: the ultima, the penult, and the antepenult. Second thing we're going to learn is identifying the three types of accents in the Greek. There are three types of accents. First, you have the acute, and notice here the acute, the symbol that we're going to deal with looks like a check mark, but it goes up toward the right. This can stand only on the last three syllables. So the acute will can land on the ultima, can land on the penult, or it can land on the antepenult. The second accent is referred to as the circumflex. It looks like a tilde, but this will only land on one of the last two syllables. So while the acute can be on any of those three syllables that we talked about, the circumflex will only be found on the ultima and the penult. Finally is the third and final accent, and that is the grave or the grave. This will only be found on the last syllable, the ultima. You will not find a circumflex on the antepenult, and you will not find a grave on the penult or the antepenult. So, those are the two things I'm going to have you commit to memory with this first lecture. Study it out, work it out really well, and we will deal with this in the lab. We'll go over it in the lab on that. If you get a chance, go over the second lecture that's going to be following this one, and then we'll go into much more detail. Thank you.